We've now had 4.8 million illegal aliens come into the United States since Joe Biden's been president. 21 and a half months. And I keep reading his numbers are getting better. God, I hope not. Because the consequences of this man's destructive policies haven't really been felt yet. Oh, I know about inflation and gas prices and what's going on with food and all the rest. But you haven't felt the real consequences of this yet because the deficit spending really hasn't kicked in fully. The border situation hasn't kicked in fully for the rest of the country. It takes a couple of years for these things to really resonate. The war on fossil fuels and the combustion engine, that certainly hasn't kicked in fully. We are going to be a much impoverished nation as a result of what this fool is doing, and a nation that's much less secure as a result of our open borders. It's just frightening and infuriating. And so some of the governors are trying to push back as best they can. And of course, as you know, Abbott's been sending illegal aliens to Chicago, to other cities, Washington, to New York, and also to Vice President Harris's residence in Washington, which we'll see in a minute. And DeSantis promised some time ago that he would be sending illegal aliens to, among other places, Martha's Vineyard. And I'm sure they were welcomed with open arms by the Obamas and the Kennedys, among other left-wing frauds. So let's take a look at this. This is WKMG 6, Orlando. Go.
New this morning, Governor DeSantis is taking credit for flying two planes officials say were filled with illegal immigrants to a different part of the country.
Yeah, it's the latest in the heated political battle over immigration, but there are still lots of questions about this, including where exactly the migrants were before being sent to Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts.
Really? I don't have a question about that in the least. So this is the media. Where were they exactly? Well, they were in our country where they're not supposed to be. So why do I care what town they were in when DeSantis decided to send them to Martha's Vineyard? Go ahead.
Levin is following the latest live in the newsroom, and Mark, the governor's office and the immigrants are saying two different things.
There's a bit of confusion on that. The governor's office is saying it's part of the state's recently approved $12 million relocation program, but the immigrants themselves say they came from Texas. All of this is coming as Republicans and Democrats continue to butt heads over the border crisis.
Two planes filled with illegal immigrants arriving in Martha's Vineyard yesterday, catching those in the Massachusetts community off guard.
Martha's Vineyard Community Services had 50 people sort of literally walk up to their front door.
The migrants saying they came from Texas. It's unclear where the planes originated from, but in a statement to CNN, a spokesperson for Governor Ron DeSantis' office said Florida can confirm the two planes with illegal immigrants that arrived in Martha's Vineyard today were part of the state's relocation program to transport illegal immigrants to sanctuary destinations. This coming after DeSantis first announced money for the program back in June.
Let me tell you, people coming illegally, a lot of them are trying to get here in the state of Florida.
It's the latest political move in what's been a trend of governors in border states sending migrants to so-called sanctuary cities.
What do you mean so-called sanctuary cities? Isn't that what they call themselves? Go ahead.
It's arriving recently in New York City, Washington, D.C., and Chicago.
We greeted them with dignity, respect, and importantly.
Wow. You greeted them with the sort of things you don't greet your own citizens with, dignity and respect. And bulletproof vests, I hope. Go ahead.
Now community leaders in Martha's Vineyard say they're stepping up to help with the unexpected arrival.
State officials in Massachusetts say they're speaking with Martha's Vineyard leaders about the next steps. Meanwhile, we've reached out to Governor DeSantis' office for further comment. We'll keep you updated with the response.
Further comment? I've got one. Why don't you F off? Excuse my French. So these border state governors who are trying to really stop this by spreading the pain of the lack of resources and so forth, they're the problem, you see. I think these people are brilliant. I think they're heroic. And I think they need our complete 100% support. Here's another example. We have 2 buses of migrants that arrived outside the vice president's residence in Washington. That's another sanctuary city. And of course, Vice President Harris is in charge of the border, which she's never visited. And when she was asked about that on NBC, she said, well, I've never been to Europe either. Okay, well, which demonstrated her brilliance. Go.
Good morning, Maria, and you're no stranger to the border. You and I have spent a lot of time there, but it appears this is the first time that Texas Governor Abbott has brought the border directly to Vice President Harris's home. She lives here at the U.S. Naval Observatory, the observatory just in the background. But as you can see out here, there are migrants that have just arrived in the last hour here on 2 buses. Maria, there were 53 on one, 48 on another, and the majority of these migrants are coming from Venezuela, although there are some from Colombia, some from Mexico, many of them telling me they want to go to New York City, but there's no one here to meet them. There's no NGO in the D.C. mayor's office, doesn't have any representatives out here right now, although we have seen the Secret Service out here, obviously trying to make sure that everything is under
So why doesn't Vice President Harris invite the 100 illegal aliens into her home? Provide them with some food and some shelter. Why doesn't she do that? She's got a wall around her compound there, the observatory, and Secret Service agents. How many of you have walls around your homes with Secret Service agents? That's what I thought. And so in a friendly way, I have advised these governors, it's time to send a few thousand illegal aliens to Rehoboth Beach. There's another wall there. It's around Biden's house, one of his estates. And as a matter of fact, we paid for that, $500,000. And these people are very, they're entrepreneurial. They're very capable of doing things that, most Americans won't do. And I'm sure that they could climb Biden's wall and invite themselves into the home, and maybe Joe Biden will help take care of them as well. So there can be a personal experience involved. This is why I've always said we ought to move our capital to El Paso, Texas. Let's see how that works out for a while. My guess is it won't work out well. So the D.C. mayor is declaring a state of emergency because a couple of thousand illegal aliens were brought to Washington, D.C., which obviously is overwhelming Washington, D.C. They get a couple thousand, they get 7,000 to 8,000 illegal aliens crossing the border every day down south. Every day. Go.
Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser declared a public emergency today after thousands of migrants have been sent to the nation's capital from Texas and Arizona over the last several months. Buses are going to New York City and to Chicago as well. It's part of a battle between some Republican governors and the Biden administration over immigration policy. Amna Nawaz recently spent time with some of these migrants and asylum seekers arriving in D.C.
Before the sun is even up, the bus arrives near Washington, D.C.'s Union Station, carrying dozens of migrants and asylum seekers who all cross the U.S. southern border into Texas. Volunteers from a nonprofit greet them after this 36-hour trip. For some, the journey began months earlier. They carry with them everything they have left.
So it's just past 6:15. The group's basically been divided into a few.
She's a huge lib, by the way. Of course, she works for the Public Broadcasting Service. Go ahead.
Have no contacts or family here in the United States. We're walking with them right now. They're going to be moved to a shelter facility here in the D.C. area. And then a smaller group of folks who say they do have some family.
May I ask you something, ma'am? May I call you ma'am? Or birthing person? May I ask you a question? How come you haven't done these reports on the southern border? How come you waited for this to happen in Washington, D.C., where NPR and PBS have their headquarters? Why didn't you go down to the southern border? Why don't you go down there now and show us what's going on to Texas and Arizona and other border states? And why don't you show us what's going on with little kids and show your viewers the rape trees that are there and all the drugs that are crossing the border? Why are you just doing this? Like poor Washington, D.C. and poor Mayor Bowser. You're missing 90% of the story. And why? because I would expose the Biden administration for the inhumanity that it's caused down there.
Want to see more? Sign up for Levin TV.